After the disturbing late-night call, Carm and I couldn't sleep. Obviously, we agreed that if it happened again, we'd use her phone to record the conversation, then forward it to the police. Lucky for us, my cell stayed silent for the rest of the night, save for the occasional spam email. "They're trying to torture us," she finally whispered in the dark. "Well, it's working," I responded. "Should we, I don't know, look into moving? This is our home, Ryan." She was right, but that was also the point. It occurred to me right then that no one should feel unsafe in their own home. Therefore, action needed to be taken. The next morning, Carm couldn't play hooky again. Her boss had apparently chewed her out pretty bad for taking a single sick day yesterday. "Asshole. Don't worry about me," I told her. "I'll be fine." "Are you sure?" "Yeah." And I knew I would be, because I had a plan. First, I phoned the police station to tell them about the strange call I'd received in the middle of the night. As I suspected, they failed to take the threat seriously, but after a bit of begging, Officer Devour at the front desk said he'd arrange for someone to stop by Liz and Dennis' place to issue them a formal warning regarding the recent incident report. At least now they'll know that the police are involved, I thought to myself. Maybe that'll put an end to this once and for all. But just in case it didn't, I decided that I should take a trip to my local gun store. It turned out that acquiring a firearm in the state I lived in was a staggeringly simple process. The guy at the counter was able to get an okay from his computer system in about 30 minutes, the duration of which I spent next door at a local deli, trying to push a turkey sandwich down my throat. I only took a few bites before I had to stop. It had been hard for me to eat much of anything since everything started, and slimy deli meat sure didn't make that task easier. Once I took care of the paperwork, I drove the weapon back to my place, feeling good and protected for the first time in a long time. I decided I wouldn't tell Carm about the gun, but only because 1, I was hoping I wouldn't have to use it, and 2, I didn't want her to be paranoid about having one in the house. That afternoon while she was at work, I spent some time fiddling with the thing, making sure I got accustomed to the weight and feel and that everything was working properly. Then, I turned the safety on and stuck it under my mattress for easy, emergency access. For the rest of the day, I sat in my office upstairs, not working, but rather, waiting for the police to pay my neighbors a little visit. Needless to say, I didn't get any writing done. The cop car didn't pull up to their house until almost 5 p.m., which I guess proves how profoundly unserious our local police department considered the situation. I sat up and watched as a uniformed officer got out of his car and knocked on the neighbor's door. Without much of a delay, Dennis answered. He was smiling, and I could tell just by looking at him that he was pretending to be clueless about the whole situation. My jaw dropped as the officer turned back to his car after only a brief, maybe 60-second conversation. But even stranger was the fact that instead of getting back into his cruiser, the cop kept walking and headed straight toward my home. Officer Eder brought nothing but bad news to my door. "He's lying," I blurted out. "I know what he said to me at dinner." Then Liz said it again, right in front of my wife. "You can ask her if you don't believe me." He shook his head and sighed. "Look, all we have here is your word against his. And he says that you're the one who's been harassing him and his lady ever since they moved in." Wait a minute." He put his hand up, signaling that he didn't want to hear what I had to say. He chalked the whole thing up to a neighborly dispute and said that I should simply stay away from Dennis and his wife if I wanted to avoid a restraining order. I couldn't believe it, but there was nothing I could do. I just nodded, let him go, then shut my door. Afterward, I looked outside, checking the neighbor's house again. That's when I saw Dennis' pale face, peering out from behind the curtains before he smiled, then disappeared back into the house. When Carm got home from work, I didn't lie to her. Rather, I decided to tell her a slightly less true version of the truth. "The police gave them a severe warning," I said, "and they assured us that we won't have any more issues." "Well, that's a relief. I'm just glad they're finally taking this seriously." "Me too." I'm not sure why I said all that. I guess I just very badly wanted it to be true. That night, I actually was able to get a bit of sleep, which surprised me. Maybe it was because I knew I finally had something to protect me, nestled underneath my mattress. But then, around 3:40 a.m., something woke me up. It was the automatic lights in our backyard, which are so bright that they shine right through the thick curtains in our bedroom. Every once in a while, a coyote or small animal would set the lights off, but I figured I'd better check it out, just to be safe. I silently sat up, made my way over to the window, and looked outside, just as the timer turned back off and the yard once again returned to darkness. As I let my eyes adjust, still half asleep, I waited patiently to see if the lights would be triggered again. But there was nothing, just night. I was just about to go back to bed when the lights flashed on again. And that's when I saw it. There was a figure, dressed in all black, who quickly moved out of my field of vision and into my blind spot, which was close to our sliding back door. Someone was in my yard. I gasped so loudly that it woke my wife up. "Ryan, what is it?" She groaned as she sat up, suddenly alert. "Call the police," I said, reaching underneath the mattress to feel around and grab the gun. "What's happening?" "Just do it, Carm," I yelled, finally pulling out the weapon. I quickly turned the safety off and made my way out of the room. "What the fuck?" she screamed. "Where did you get that?" I was already in the hallway when I answered, "Just call 911. Now, I felt like I was in a movie or something as I hurried down the stairs, gun in hand. My hands were shaking as I opened the back sliding door and edged outside. I was terrified, but there was also a part of me that wanted to catch Dennis in the act. Before, he'd gotten off by lying. But this time, he was trespassing. "I know you're out here," I shouted, trying to hide the fear in my voice. "I've got a gun and I'm not afraid to use it." The floodlights flashed on again, but every few seconds they'd turn off and I'd have to wave my hand around to make sure I wasn't swallowed by the dark. "I know you're here, Dennis," I shouted again as I wandered around the dark yard. "This ends tonight." All I could hear were the sounds of silence. Then, in the distance, something faint. Sirens. The cops were on their way. "Oh, thank God," I thought. "Here comes the cavalry." As the sirens grew nearer, I lowered my gun and came to the conclusion that whoever was roaming around my yard was now gone. But that's when I saw it. It was a single porcelain plate, placed right outside our sliding glass door. I must have walked right past it when I stumbled out into the yard, shaking like a leaf and too on edge to notice. I walked over to inspect the plate. On it was a raw slab of meat, sitting in a pool of bloody juices. My heart started beating again, faster and faster, as I looked to a note that had been left next to it. It simply read, "You are nothing but meat." I gagged thoroughly as a realization hit me. That piece of meat didn't come from an animal. It came from a human.